Breaking news in the mystery disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has just confirmed shocking new information about the ransom notes. We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. She will be held for ransom, and once payment is received, she will be released unharmed. We will be holding her for a maximum of 7 days. You will need to send Bitcoin in the amount of 4 million USD before 5 p.m. on Thursday the 5th. If payment is not received, the ransom will be increased to 6 million USD, which will need to be paid by 5 p.m. on Monday the 9th. Once payment is received to the Bitcoin address below, she will be released within 12 hours of deposit to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson. If payment is not received by the last deadline on Monday the 9th at 5 p.m., she will be killed. Your mother is aware of this, and her life is in your hands. It is in the best interest of everyone to have this completed as soon as possible. You will not be able to contact me from here on out. There will be no negotiation. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. And then at the bottom, it's written as she had a white smartwatch on the floor of her bed and white floodlight in the backyard.
The porch light catches a figure standing motionless on a suburban doorstep in the middle of the night. Mask on, something hanging from a strap on his back. He does not knock.
Breaking news in the mystery disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has just confirmed shocking new information about the ransom notes that have haunted this case. For the first time, we're seeing the actual ransom notes from law enforcement, plus a chilling development that police seem to believe this was no spur-of-the-moment crime. The suspect may have stalked the home, studied the scene, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. This is a breaking news edition of On the Case presented.
He does not run. He simply reaches toward the potted plants by the door, as if checking them, then steps back into the dark.
That believed these notes were sent on, or that the videos rather were from different dates. So I think it's chilling, of course, as you say. The porch guy that we've seen already on the videos, and we see that up close picture of him, the video, and the mustache through the mask. That's a cold operator as far as I'm concerned. It does not seem, frazzled at all. The plants, reaching for the plants is obviously a very strange part of this, and makes no sense to me. But, it screams to me premeditation and pre-planning. And so
a doorbell camera captures the whole thing in silence. That footage sat largely unexplained for months. Now, 6 months after it was first pulled from an Arizona home, investigators say it may not even be from a single night.
A big update coming in from the Pima County Sheriff in Arizona related to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. We are seeing for the first time from law enforcement the 2 ransom notes that were sent to media outlets at the beginning of all of this when Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in the middle of the night, and also the sheriff raising some questions about when the videos were taken of that mysterious figure on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. And there is a possibility that those videos, according to the sheriff, were taken on different nights.
The home belonged to Nancy Guthrie, taken from her Tucson-area house in the early hours of February 1st. Her daughter, Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie, became the public face of a search that turned into one of the most closely watched missing person cases of the year. For most of that time, the Pima County Sheriff's Office said little. Press conferences were rare, updates were rarer. Then, approaching the 6-month mark, the department released a batch of material. It had been sitting on 2 ransom notes, sent to local television and to TMZ near the start of the investigation, and new doubts about the doorbell footage that had defined the case's public image.
Does that.
No, and it's, and I should have pointed this out before. So the first letter was February 2nd, and the second letter came on February 6th. So you have a 4-day difference. And then it's just the motive of you're speaking directly to the Guthrie family, yet you're sending it to KOLD television and TMZ. Right. It's just a very bizarre collection of media outlets to send it to, especially if you're trying to now comfort a family, but then still put it out in the public like that. If this is all real, and police aren't confirming it, they're saying it's May.
The first note arrived February 2nd, addressed to Savannah directly. It demanded $4 million in Bitcoin, with a 7-day deadline, and a threat that the amount would rise to $6 million if the first deadline passed. It warned against contacting police, stating law enforcement could not help, and closed with 2 specific details meant to prove authenticity: a smartwatch left on the bedroom floor and a backyard floodlight that had been disabled. Both details had circulated in earlier reporting on the case. The note also contained a documented misspelling of the word received.
Yeah, they may have some validity. I've always wondered if these notes were a cover to buy time to cover up a homicide. I don't know that, but it's always been a thought of mine. Obviously, they're releasing these right now for a reason. They didn't do it before then, or before this time, rather. The 6-month anniversary of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is here. It's upon us. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are some interesting things in this note, how they're saying, don't call the cops. They're not going to help. They cannot help you. They are very adamant and certain of this. The cops had already been called. The cops had already been called by the time these notes were sent. These were sent to local TV stations and to TMZ. The cops were already aware.
Right.
That's how the cops got these notes. So I find that to be very curious. And that's why it makes me wonder, are these simply a cover and a reason and in a way or an attempt to buy time to cover up a murder? That is a thought of mine. What I also find interesting about this, we have a misspelling. I'm going to point that out. Received is spelled incorrectly in this note. And, do not play games. Law enforcement won't be able to help you, but they do.
Investigators have not confirmed the note's authenticity. A Reuters report earlier in the case suggested law enforcement sources had doubts about whether the notes were genuine at all. The sheriff's office, in releasing them now, stopped short of vouching for them either, but chose to put the exact text in front of the public regardless.
Just first off, it's just a chilling thing to read when you go through this. And there's been kind of a back and forth with anonymous reporting. Reuters had a story that these ransom notes may not have any validity whatsoever. I think the fact that you're actually seeing this from the Pima County Sheriff and they're putting it out to the public, I don't know if it confirms it. They're not confirming it, but it seems like the notes may actually have some validity to them.
4 days later, a second note appeared. Its tone was, by any reading, a different one. Where the first letter spoke of ransom, deadlines, and consequences, this one opened by addressing the Guthrie family as a whole rather than Savannah alone, and struck an apologetic register. It claimed the writer had not grasped the seriousness of Nancy's physical condition, said her death came shortly after she was taken and was believed to be heart-related, and included one line that has since become the note's most quoted. She is buried in nature now.
And it starts very differently. And the tone of this is noticeably different from that first one. It's much shorter as well. Guthrie family, we did not fully grasp the seriousness of her physical condition. We never intended to hurt her. That was not our intention. She perished shortly after she was taken. We believe it was heart-related. She is buried in nature now. Nothing you could have done could have changed the outcome. We want your family to know this.
It closed by telling the family nothing they could have done would have changed the outcome, and offering an apology. The contradiction is not subtle. The first note promised Nancy would be released unharmed once payment arrived. The second, sent within the same short window, describes her as already dead, and asks the family for a kind of forgiveness no ransom note typically bothers to request. If the same person wrote both, the shift from threat to consolation is not something investigators say they commonly see in kidnapping for ransom cases, which are themselves uncommon to begin with.
Just even addressing the Guthrie family, where the first note was Savannah, and now it's the entire family. And we know that she had heart issues, and that was a concern. She had health problems, but very different tone in the way of this, saying that they didn't want to hurt her when that is so different from what they said if this is the same writer in that first letter.
Yeah, it's a very different tone. And I don't know many, I don't think I've ever seen a kidnapping case, and we don't see that many kidnapping for ransom cases. They seem pretty rare, where somebody would say, oh, we didn't mean to do this. We didn't mean to hurt her. Well, you've already threatened to kill her in the first note. You already said you would do that if you didn't get the Bitcoin. And so it's a much different tone, saying she's buried with nature. I mean, I don't, that's not how people talk. I've said this before. Nobody talks that.
There are other inconsistencies worth walking through. Both notes referenced USD when describing the ransom amount, a phrasing rarely used by someone writing in American English inside the United States, where dollar figures are typically stated without the currency code attached.
That first one that stood out to me too, before we read that second one, USD. Because I just think like nobody says USD if you're in the United States. You would just say, 10 million, $6 million. And the border, you can cross into Nogales, which is just like an hour south of Tucson. I've actually crossed that border, and it just stood out to me like how easy it is to get across too. The border may open, I think, at like 6 a.m., but like they're not.
The first note also referenced returning Nancy to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson, a phrase that leaves open whether the writer was operating from somewhere else, possibly across the nearby Mexican border, less than an hour south of the city.
It didn't appear that way, but the whole back in Tucson part of it, I mean, that could be Mexico. It could be another city in Arizona. We simply don't know. But I think the USD part of this is a very big clue. That is not the way that Americans write and talk about currency. Nobody talks like that. So it could be somebody in Mexico. Again, these could be fake, but it could be somebody in Mexico, and the tones are very different. So they're hoping that somebody who knows something sees these notes and says, I know somebody who talks like that. This looks familiar. So I think that this could be them really trying to
None of this is confirmed. It is, at most, a linguistic pattern the sheriff's office appears to be inviting the public to help interpret. In its release, the department wrote that the notes reveal identifiable patterns of word choice and phrasing that speak to the writer's mindset and to how that mindset evolved over the days between the two letters.
They're saying it's May. I think the fact that they're putting out to the public, they do write this in the press release. This is from the sheriff. They say, these communications reveal distinctive patterns of word choice, syntax, and phraseology that reflect the writer's unique linguistic style. Mm-hmm. They also provide valuable insight into the person's mindset, motives, and evolution of their tone over time. So, they're putting it out there to see if somebody, and I think the call to the public will definitely be more so in the video part we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, it's just a weird way to talk. And then also they say back in Tucson, which is
alongside the notes. The sheriff's office revisited the doorbell footage that had circulated since the case broke. Footage originally surfaced by FBI Director Kash Patel, requiring extraction from Nancy's Ring system because her account lacked cloud storage.
Headlines right now are the videos and the images initially released by Kash Patel, the FBI director, of that person in a mask, seemingly armed, on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. And people may remember that this was video they said had to be extracted from, because Ring, if you don't pay for a particular service, it doesn't get saved to the cloud. It had to be extracted. So there wasn't a lot of information surrounding like when this video was taken. We know from times of when it was, turned off, but in terms of when that video and this person was actually on her front steps, like that wasn't clear. But now they're saying, quote, 2 videos recovered from Nancy's doorbell camera, maybe from 2 separate days. These videos.
Investigators now say 2 separate clips may have been recorded on 2 separate nights, rather than one continuous sequence from the night Nancy disappeared. If accurate, that reframes the entire narrative around the mysterious figure at her door. A single night's footage could support a burglary. Gone. Wrong theory. someone who broke in without knowing Nancy would be home. Footage spanning 2 nights suggests something else, a return visit. Deliberate scouting, a target chosen and studied rather than stumbled into.
These videos are critical to our understanding of the unidentified male's behaviors and choices. They indicate he took steps to prepare for the event on the night of January 31st to February 1st, which is so chilling to think about this not being, because there was that theory out there of maybe they just hit a house, it was a burglary, and they didn't know that Nancy was going to be there. If this actually happened on 2 separate nights where they get this video, it shows that maybe there was more planning than some people thought when it came to targeting, and we don't know particularly the motive yet, but certainly targeting someone with a daughter who's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, I think
the sheriff's office also released a list of behavioral changes it is asking the public to watch for in people they know. Shifts in mood or visible anxiety, sudden changes in appearance, unexplained injuries, missed work or routine disruptions, unusual vehicle cleaning, and a marked interest or disinterest in either Nancy's neighborhood or the investigation itself.
See a change in the way that somebody acts, that could be a red flag, that maybe they had something to do with this. So I'm just going to read these off. They say a change in mood or displays of anxiety, nervousness, or irritability, a change of physical appearance, hair color or cut, growth or removal of facial hair, etc. Unexplained injuries, cuts on hands, bruises, etc. During the period Nancy was last seen, normal routine changes like missing work, classes, appointments, sudden departures from the area around the time of her disappearance, vehicle cleaning or repairs, unexplained interests or disinterest in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, noticeable intense interest or disinterest in the investigation.
It is a standard checklist in cases like this. What stands out is the timing 6 months in, with no arrest, and by the department's own account, no DNA match from hair evidence tested earlier this year. That absence of forensic progress may explain the timing of this release more than anything else. The sheriff's office has historically spoken only when it judged doing so would serve the investigation. A DNA result that led nowhere, followed within hours by a large public release of notes and footage, suggests a department running low on leads and choosing to make its remaining evidence public in hopes that someone, a neighbor, a coworker, a family member of whoever wrote these notes, recognizes something in the wording or the image. Savannah Guthrie herself released a video earlier in the week, before the sheriff's release, addressing whoever took her mother directly and asking them to do the right thing. Whether that was coordinated with investigators or driven by the approaching 6-month mark has not been confirmed. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been named. The FBI, brought into the investigation days after Nancy's disappearance, continues to assist with digital forensics, tracking the Bitcoin address listed in the first note and analyzing the doorbell footage. While Pima County remains the lead agency absent a confirmed federal nexus, there has been public tension between the sheriff's office and the FBI over how quickly federal resources were engaged, though both sides continue working the case through a joint task
changes
force.
In behavior, anxiety, sudden interest in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, and then it goes away. I mean, the guilt may very well be eating somebody involved in this alive. And that's what they're hoping for. And you're right. Everybody has been involved in this, but I think there may have been some missteps in the very beginning. Sheriff Nano said they called the FBI, but Kash Patel, there's been a war of words between the two. He says they weren't brought in until 4 days later and that their precious time was lost. It's amazing to me that maybe there hasn't been more progress made toward an arrest, but also, Chris, we just don't know.
Right.
We don't know if they've got their eyes on a couple of people or if they're simply just desperate at this point in time.
Right. And it certainly give a benefit to the doubt as they're continuing to work. You have this sheriff, Chris Nanos in Pima County. He's been at the end of a lot of criticism.
Yes.
There's been a lot of reporting about potential tension between the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office and questions about whether they're step by step. I know there's a task force. Just what do you make at this point Because like you look at this and you wonder, like, is the FBI, they're the ones who are really kind of handling the video part of it and trying to track down where this Bitcoin wallet's located. Like, how involved is the Pima County Sheriff actually when it comes to some of the digital forensics in this case, the digital evidence of like the ransom note and where that may have come from, you know, where these videos came from in the days. Just what do you take of it being the sheriff's office being the one putting this information out today?
Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remains unsolved. The identity of whoever wrote either ransom note and whether the two letters came from the same hand has not been established.
I just keep thinking back to like, and we have great law enforcement experts. And I just remember in the beginning, like when that video came out of Porch Guy, and how many of them, like former FBI agents, former, you know, major city law enforcement would say this guy just looks like an absolute amateur, right? Like it's the backpack and he's like got this mask that you can still kind of see parts of his face. And it's like, it does look like a guy where if you were to like AI, hey, what does a burglar look like? I mean, that's the Halloween costume. And yet you've had everybody from Donald Trump pushing this, Kash Patel, the resources of the FBI, all these different agencies seemingly putting a ton of effort into trying to find it. And it just blows my mind that here we are 6 months later, and it just seems on the surface, we're at this point where it's like, if you see something, say something. And that's how close we are to finding Nancy Guthrie.
Yeah.
What would make someone write a note promising a woman's safe return, only to send a second one days later describing her as already buried? And why send either to a television station instead of directly to the family being addressed? That question, for now, belongs to whoever is still out there. 2 notes, 4 days apart, telling 2 very different stories about the same woman. Decide for yourself which one, if either, you believe.